Chicago Bears training camp is underway, and there are plenty of storylines for us to keep tabs on, including Caleb Williams' progress on the types of play calling and cadence struggles he had earlier in the offseason. The pads will be coming on soon for these Bears pass rushers, so we can get a sense of what this defensive line has, and also keeping tabs on the offensive line combinations, the center battle, who's filling in as backups, and where the injury status stands for a few different players we have concerns about.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Terms and conditions apply. On the show today, we bring you the latest training camp storylines as the Bears are practicing again at Hallis Hall. Football is back. Football is here, and it's so much fun to be able to talk about like actual things that are happening again, as opposed to looking ahead to what is going to be happening. So we'll start with Caleb Williams' progress with this Bears offense, the operation of it, and also, how he's doing throwing at practice. We'll talk about this Bears defensive line where Gervon Dexter is again getting a lot of the hype from now Montez Sweat, talking up what Dexter's been able to do, but we're going to really find out what this defensive line does when the pads fully come on and they go full contact. And we'll stay in the trenches today and also look at this Bears offensive line, where we got an update on the Bears center battle and also some of the other questions on this offensive line that otherwise is pretty established with the starters, but we're still trying to figure out what this depth is going to look like and how prepared they might be for injuries with a couple of, injury-prone type players on this defensive line. But of course, training camp is and will continue to be all about Caleb Williams. The whole offseason is all about Caleb Williams, and I try to be conscious to not overdo it and just talk Caleb Williams every single day because, there's a lot more going on with this team, and we can get sick of saying Caleb Williams everything every day, so I'll be cautious of that. But to start training camp, I really wanted to see from a storyline standpoint how he's making progress on some of the things we heard about earlier in the offseason. I think the storyline coming out of rookie mini camps, OTAs, and then mandatory veteran training camp was that, making progress, normal ups and downs as a rookie, but one of the things that they were struggling with a little bit was Caleb's cadence, getting the snap count correct, the play calls in correctly, and that everyone is on the same page when he's doing a hard count or anything like that, how he delivers those things at the line of scrimmage that may be a little different than how he was asked to deliver them at USC. And so it's not necessarily easy to fully practice that in a month off before training camp because you kind of have to practice that with the guys out there on the field. But what Caleb did do was spend some time in a hotel with Keenan Allen so that they could work through plays together and not that they lived together and were roommates per se, but could be around each other a lot more and talk through football plays and just kind of get to know each other better and build that stronger connection between rookie quarterback and veteran wide receiver. And Keenan Allen has already seen a difference in how Caleb Williams is operating under center and just having everybody a little bit more on the same page now at training camp.
You said that Caleb leveled up a couple times in just his understanding of the offense over the summer. How do you describe how quickly he's picking ththings up over the past month?
I thought it was great. Like I said today, he was real solid. He called the plays way better than he was in OTAs. He felt confident in the plays and knowing what he was doing. And, there was no, no timidness from him, today. So.
You guys spent together in the hotel. What do you think the biggest things were accomplished, both from a connection standpoint and then also just in terms of him being able to take your wisdom and be able to absorb that at a time when obviously it's probably pretty important for him?
I think just being able to talk ball, understanding each other. Like I said, going over the plays and, just being able to talk to him through certain coverages, seeing him the way I seen him in the past and seeing him the way he thinks that he'll see him. And, just being able to talk ball.
Keenan Allen also said that over this summer break, Caleb hosted, or organized, I should say, a couple of throwing sessions with, wide receivers and running backs and tight ends and stuff coming out to LA. So they got to do some, they're not practices per se, but more practice throwing and getting on the same page with these guys. So I think we're seeing and hearing Caleb Williams doing the work, the specific extra work that by definition is not being asked of him per se, but is helping, right? It's not written into his contract that he has to have these throwing sessions or that he has to, room with Keenan Allen for a little bit. Those are things that are above and beyond that he's going and doing that are helping accelerate his development. And that's the main thing we want to see from Caleb. From here, yes, we're keeping track on what he's doing in practice, and he's making some nice throws and also threw an interception to Tyreek Stevenson over the weekend. There's still going to be the good and the bad. And I think the Bears are monitoring that normally. And I don't think there's anything to be concerned about yet. I don't think there's also not anything to run away with the hype either. I think it's helping keep things at a nice kind of healthy level at this point. We're not getting blown away by, oh my gosh, he's making all these amazing throws and he's so great and everything is perfect and blah blah blah. Then the hype and the expectations can kind of get a little too far out of control. And on the other hand, if everybody was harping on every little mistake Caleb made, an incomplete pass here, an interception there, is there disaster brewing in Chicago? I think we're finding so far, albeit a small sample size to start training camp, a nice balanced middle ground approach to Caleb that I think is beneficial for all of us, even on the outside, to not ride this roller coaster of hype and disappointment and ups and downs or whatever. No, let's see this through nice and steady. Now, I'd like to see over the course of training camp more of that feeling of Caleb is special. That, not that he has to be special and be a 4,000 or 5,000 yard receiver right away for his entirety of his rookie season, but I want more of those moments of wow, this is a number one overall pick. I think Caleb is producing the normal quarterback, narrative here, the normal progression and storyline. But at the same time, Caleb is not supposed to be a normal rookie quarterback. And so I'm struggling with this balance of yes, let's let him make normal rookie quarterback progression, but also at some point we need to see him be more than that because he's supposed to be more than that. That we were sold on him being more than that. So far, everything we've heard about Caleb Williams has been pretty similar to how we heard about, Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields, their rookie seasons, right? Make some good plays, make some mistakes, normal rookie stuff. And that's fine. And that doesn't mean Caleb is going to go down the same path as those quarterbacks. But at the same time, the whole point about Caleb was that we should expect him to be better than those guys. And that doesn't mean he has to be better than other rookies right now today. But that's something over the next month, as we get into the preseason, are we going to get more of an indication of yes, there's what made him the number one overall pick. Not, okay, he's just a regular rookie quarterback. Because I think we need him to be more than just a regular rookie quarterback. But that doesn't mean he has to be CJ Stroud or be a Pro Bowl rookie and win MVP. There's a middle ground here where we can say he needs to have better than average expectations, but not out of this world expectations either. And that's what I want to keep tabs on with Caleb moving forward at practice. Can we get a little bit more than normal rookie ups and downs without having to say he's got to be a perfect rookie quarterback? That's the sweet spot that we should hope Caleb Williams finds himself in as that number one overall pick. Similarly, it's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this Bears defensive line and the young players there trying to develop at the reasonable sort of pace for them. And the hype is definitely building around Gervon Dexter. I'm certainly hoping Gervon Dexter has a very successful career and all that, but I do want to make sure that we're realistic about this and taking stock on hype versus real progress here. So we'll kind of look at what Montez Sweat said about Dexter and how we'll evaluate this Bears defensive line when the pads come on next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's number one sportsbook. And even though, Bears aren't playing games just yet, although we're 2 weeks away from the first preseason game, doesn't mean you can't still bet on football or, across sports. They've got it all at FanDuel. Whether it's the baseball season, it's golf, it's soccer, it's tennis tournaments, they've got it all for you. And you can even bet week 1 Titans at Bears. Bears are 4.5-point favorites for that game. The best part is, all summer long, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. This Chicago Bears defensive line has been a focus for us and a lot of, I think, Bears fans this offseason as like the position that has the most questions and has the potential to be the biggest weakness collectively as a position group on this Bears team. And we'll finally get a chance to see them put the pads on and get a better sense of what kind of development all of the younger players have made and how much farther ahead they can be now that Montez Sweat has been here for the offseason and isn't just being traded in and dropping in halfway through the season and trying to learn on the fly. I don't think OTAs and minicamp have really given us a proper look at that yet. And Ryan Poles basically admitted as much on if you listen to Friday's podcast here on Locked On Bears, we played the audio of Ryan Poles talking about evaluating this defensive line and feeling like, they're happy with what they've seen from them so far, but they don't really know until the pads come on. Like, everything has been encouraging in what they wanted to see from them, but we'll really see the real progress when they can actually, hit the offensive lineman ahead of them like more fully and be in the more replicable situations and use your physicality a little bit more than when it's just kind of shells or, no pads, just kind of skin on skin is a little bit less representative of what we're going to see during the regular season. But that being said, we are getting the kind of encouraging updates you'd like to hear about some of the key players in this, including Gervon Dexter, your starting 3-technique defensive tackle, second-round pick last year out of Florida, who had occasional flashes as a rookie and now is going to be asked to be that primary number one interior pass rusher. The Bears need him to take a big step forward this season. They are relying on him to do so, and he's certainly doing everything in his control to come into training camp in the best position he can, including a lot of progress on his body and being in really great shape to the point where he's doing things that guys his size should not be able to do. Here's how Montez Sweat characterized it.
Montez, there's been a lot of talk about Gervon and how he's reshaped his body, but from an on-the-field standpoint, how have you seen him grow from when you came in till now?
Yeah, he did the conditioning test with the DNs yesterday. And when we was in the position meet, he had a little beach. They put a picture of him in a little beach suit. He had the shirt out and all that type of stuff. So, yeah, he definitely made a transformation in his body. But, I always expected big things out of Gervon. He's just waiting to blow, honestly.
Who said?
I'm not here to be the Gervon Dexter hater by any means. Like I said, I am rooting for him, and I hope he is successful, and I certainly think he's got a lot of potential that he can still, I still think he will develop into something very good, but I have been consistent this offseason, and I guess dating back, but on trying to tone down the hype for him and be more realistic about what we should expect for him and not get too caught up in these types of things from Montez Sweat, because this is very much the training camp narrative that everyone loves and is exciting. And wow, he did conditioning tests with the defensive ends. His body is in great shape. And those are all very good things. Those are not things that we should be upset about or discount as not being good. Great. It's important that Gervon Dexter is in great shape and is as physically crafted as he can. But we talked about this a little bit earlier in the offseason too, when these things were coming out about him being in good shape. It's like the body wasn't the problem and hasn't necessarily been the problem for Gervon Dexter. When the Bears drafted Gervon Dexter, we knew they were getting a physically gifted but raw defensive tackle prospect. We knew coming out of Florida that he was big and strong and could move really well for someone who was big and strong. And that was great, but technique-wise needed a lot of work. The Bears had to rebuild him from the ground up, teach him, footwork and stance and getting out of his stance and, where his hands are supposed to go and pad level and all this stuff. And that part has been a major work in progress. And I think we still need to see a lot more progress in that regard before we can really trust him as a consistent starting level interior pass rusher. And so fast forward to this offseason, and Gervon Dexter's in great shape. And he's doing the conditioning with the defensive ends, and his body is great. And that's great, but that was already his strength, right? That was already what we knew Dexter was valuable for, was the body. That was why he got drafted in the second round. So like the part of him that we already know to be special got even a little bit better, but that's not the thing he needed to, that's not the step towards winning, right? That's not what he needed to fix. It's not what will make or break how good he is this season. Like, sure, it'll help. It's a good thing. I'm not here to say this is meaningless or valueless or doesn't add to Gervon Dexter's game. Absolutely not. But it doesn't signal that he's going to be great this year. What will determine whether he's great this year is his technique, his hand placement, his pad level. You know what I mean? Like these kind of technique things that sure maybe are easier when your body is in the perfect shape or however you want to characterize it for him right now. But we still need to see him get the pads on and show that his pad level is better, that his hand placement's better, that he's getting out of his stances quicker. And we have not heard that yet because he hasn't had the pads on yet. He hasn't had the chance to really show us that yet. And so I'm not here to say he hasn't made progress or isn't going to be good for any reason. Like we just don't know yet. And that's where I try and let's calm down the hype a little bit. The player who is physically gifted is, we learned from Montez Sweat that the physically gifted player is physically gifted. It's not necessarily new information. I mean, it's a different version of the same thing we already knew. Oh yeah, he's physically gifted. And here's another example of him being physically gifted in this way. And that's great. We want Gervon Dexter to be physically gifted. But we already knew he was physically gifted. And what we still need to know is whether the technique can catch up to the physical gifts. And we haven't really gotten any indication of that yet. And so we don't know yet what kind of step forward Gervon Dexter will take. And so I don't want people to take this quote from Montez Sweat, this conditioning thing, and say, see, that's it. He's going to be great this season. See, he's in such great shape. He's going to have a big year. Bye on Gervon Dexter. And my thing is, actually, we have no idea yet whether he's going to have a good year or not because we don't know how much better he actually is at playing defensive tackle. We just know his body is better, but his body was already part of the package here that we were excited about. So not a lot has changed in that regard for Dexter, and we're not going to know until those pads come on. Same thing is true for DeMarcus Walker. Can he take a bigger step and be the starting defensive end? Let's see when the pads come on how well he does against Darnell Wright over and over again in practice. Is Zach Pickens going to take a step forward at defensive tackle? Well, see how the technique is. Let's see when the pads come on. Like all these things. Dominique Robinson, same story. Physically gifted player. The physical gifts are not the thing that needs to change. It's the technique and it's the consistency there. Same for Dexter. And so that's what we really need to watch throughout training camp, not just what kind of shape Gervon Dexter is and which conditioning test he does, which is great and cool, but not all that meaningful to evaluating him as a quality defensive tackle this season. So that's where this defensive line storyline at camp, we need to correct it a little bit here. And then once the pads come on, Ryan Poles will make a determination as to whether or not they need to sign Yannick Ngakoue or just keep rolling with what they have in that group. I'm also really curious how the offensive line does when the pads come on. But even without the pads, we've gotten a better sense of what the depth chart looks like there based on how players are filling in for others and also some general injury updates for that group. So we'll kind of check in on this offensive line and what we're learning about the different combinations up front, including this Bears center competition, the only starting job really up for grabs anywhere on this Bears roster. That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality candidates that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs because they have all the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. The key is that LinkedIn is not just a job board. Because I'm on LinkedIn, and you're probably on LinkedIn, and if you're not, a lot of your friends, family members, and coworkers are all on LinkedIn. And that's how LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. Because even people who aren't actively looking for a new job might be open to the perfect role, and you can reach them on LinkedIn. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. we generally know the jobs of the offensive linemen in Chicago. We generally know what this line is going to look like, but we're getting some updates early at training camp here based on how players are being used, and also some injury updates as well, even though the pads haven't fully gone on yet to these, full-on, full-contact type practices yet. So let's start with the center competition, where the Bears traded for Ryan Bates from the Buffalo Bills this offseason and signed Coleman Shelton from the Los Angeles Rams to a one-year deal in free agency. And that's an open competition, and the only true position battle open competition for a starting job anywhere on this roster. I mean, you could argue that maybe the defensive line could have some competition opening up there, sort of, but not really. I mean, wide receivers are everything's pretty set elsewhere on this team. But center is Bates versus Shelton. Day one of practice, Ryan Bates was with the starters and did the entire practice with the starters. Never worked with the backups at all. Occasionally he got a rep off and somebody else would fill in for him as a starter. But he was the day one starting center. And he is definitely in the lead in this center battle, for sure. Day two, Coleman Shelton is the starting center and does all of practice with the starters. So this competition is far from decided and is definitely wide open. And they're going to keep rotating the two of them. But the fact that Bates got first crack day one, snap one with the starters tells you that he is in first place. It was not a coin flip or a random decision by Shane Waldron or the offensive line coach Chris Morgan to say, who wants to go out there first today? I don't know, Ryan, you go today. No, very intentional about who gets what reps and who gets to be the starter the first day of training camp. So it's Bates' job to lose at center right now, and Shelton is, I guess, on the outside looking in. It's important that Ryan Bates got to be at center to start the first practice because earlier this offseason, during OTAs and stuff, Ryan Bates was also filling in at right guard because Nate Davis had been unavailable for some amount of Chicago Bears practices that we don't know for sure, and we don't know why he had been unavailable. But one of their options to replace him was having Ryan Bates move from center to right guard and then have Coleman Shelton be the starting center. But Nate Davis is practicing and is practicing in full and is participating fully as far as we know. He is good to go. So you can feel, hopefully for now, a little more confident in the offensive line as it stands, where yes, it's still Bates versus Shelton, and that is a competition that will keep playing out. But we're on track for a left to right offensive line of Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Ryan Bates, Nate Davis, and Darnell Wright. And all five of those guys are more or less fully healthy. I guess Braxton Jones left practice briefly with a minor injury. It wasn't anything that he's going to miss time for, but just, regular type of wear and tear. I don't remember if it was an ankle or some kind of, just a little normal thing. So I guess technically not 100% healthy, but no one is actively none of the starters are actively missing practice with a major injury type thing. Karan Amagaji, your third round pick from Yale, is still on the non-football injury list. Although note there that they took Gerald Everett off of the non-football injury list. So Gerald Everett will be past his physical and will be back at practice and good to go. So nothing to worry about with Gerald Everett on the injury front. It's mostly just Amagaji is the last lingering injured player that we don't have a super, concrete timeline for at this point. When Braxton Jones left practice with that injury, the fill-in with the starters at left tackle was Larry Borum. With Amagaji injured, Borum seems to be pretty clearly that number 3 offensive tackle on the depth chart. And he's been a guy that is considered to be on the roster bubble, right? He was a 5th-round pick a number of years ago, I think, from the previous regime. And he's coming up on the end of his contract. And it's not that he's crazy expensive or anything, and the Bears are going to save a ton of money from him. But, the last year of his deal is a couple $1 million. It's guaranteed, so you're not going to get a bunch of cutting, but $3.2 million. And he started games at tackle and guard before, so there's some thought that he could be maybe a late round trade asset. It's instead of cutting him, because if you end up keeping Karan Amagaji as your number 3 offensive tackle, and then maybe your number 3 guard is Matt Pryor or Jatari Carter, and then Coleman Shelton's your backup center, Larry Borum could be on the outside looking in there and be someone who's expendable from this team. There's a lot of competition on this backup offensive line. It's one of the things that Ryan Poles highlighted as an area that they really wanted to get better at, is better offensive line depth, because offensive line injuries are inevitable. especially given the recent histories of Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis. Guard injuries are something we should anticipate at least a little bit on this Bears offensive line. And so if Amagaji is your top tackle, then do you need to prioritize your top backup tackle? Then do you need to prioritize more natural guards, or do you trust Larry Borom to play guard because he's playing left tackle now and he can play right tackle? But I think we're just starting to get a better sense of like, okay, this offensive line depth competition is real, but Borom is not currently someone who's slated to miss the 53-man roster. It's only been 2 days of training camp practices, so a lot can change, but he's starting from an advantageous position here atop of the offensive tackle depth chart. First guy off the bench at offensive tackle is clearly an advantage right now. But once Amagaji is healthy, does he become that guy? And then do you keep Borom and Amagaji as 2 backup tackles? Do you end up keeping 9 offensive linemen? Like, this starts to become a bigger roster conversation about how many linemen do you keep there versus how many defensive linemen do you keep versus how many cornerbacks or safeties do you keep? Do you keep 1 fewer safety, you keep 4 instead of 5 or something, and to keep a 9th offensive lineman? Like, that's going to be the conversation. And does Larry Borom find himself on the fringe there? For now, he's filling in with the starters. So the Bears still clearly like Larry Borom quite a bit and have him playing key snaps at practice here. And I think, if you have to bet right now, like, if he's playing with the starters, he's got a 53-man roster spot. It's his to lose, and he could still lose it, but he's sitting in a good spot and not so precariously on the roster bubble just yet. He's still going to face tough competition from the likes of Jake Curhan and Matt Pryor, who they brought in as free agents. Aviante Collins has been here for a couple of seasons, so they've got names at offensive tackle. But the important thing is that everyone is pretty much healthy except Karan Amagaji. Your starters are set. Nate Davis is back and locked in, and then it's just the center starter that's the competition. And they've been trying. Shane Waldron's been trying to downplay a little bit. Like, Caleb Williams is comfortable with both centers, he has said. I believe that to be true. I also think it would be best for Caleb Williams if you could stick to one center and have him work with just that one center for as long as possible. So I hope they solidify that competition sooner rather than later. I predict they won't. I predict we will go through a couple of preseason games before we know who the starting center is going to be. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but the Bears have a history of dragging on these competitions, and I think that having a negative impact on the offensive line as a result. We'll see if that ends up being the case, but it's Bates' job to lose right now, just like how it's Larry Borom's job to lose on the backup offensive tackle spots, and the rest of your 4 offensive line starters, good to go for now. If there's any changes to that, major injuries up front or anything like that we need to know, you can be sure we'll break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, I was a guest on the Locked On NFL podcast with Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens. We talked about Caleb Williams' contract, talked a little bit about Caleb Williams at practice, Eddie Jackson going to the Ravens we touched on briefly as well. Lots of goodies there in Locked On NFL, so make that your second listen or check one of our other Locked On Podcast Network podcasts, your team every day. Come on back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears with more training camp updates. And of course, you have to come back for your next opportunity to bear down.